Before we begin, pause for a moment. What you're about to witness is more than history. It's the story of men who refused to die quietly, who bent metal with their bare hands because no one else would. These names were nearly lost. If stories like this matter to you, if you believe the forgotten deserve to be remembered, then stay with us. Let's bring them back. Now, let's go to war. June 14, 1944. Villers-Bocage, Normandy. The Cromwell tank shudders. Inside, Trooper James Harland feels the world compress into a single high-pitched whine. The 88mm shell has just punched through the hedge to their left, missing the turret by inches. The air inside the hull tastes like burning oil and adrenaline. His hands are locked on the radio set. His breath won't come. Outside, through the vision slit, he sees the Tiger. It sits at the end of the cobblestone street like an iron cathedral, angular, patient, unstoppable. Its gun traverses slowly, deliberately. The kind of slow that means the crew inside knows they have all the time in the world. Harland's commander, Lieutenant Peter Wyatt, doesn't shout. He whispers, "Back. No." The driver slams reverse. The Cromwell lurches backward, track screaming against stone. But the Tiger is faster. Its turret locks. The barrel steadies. Wyatt closes his eyes. The shell hits. Not the front. Not the turret. It strikes the hull at a steep angle, right where the crew welded a patchwork layer of salvaged track links 2 days ago. Scrap metal. Improvised. Mocked by their own mechanics as tin foil wishful thinking. The impact sounds like the sky cracking open. But the shell doesn't penetrate. It deflects. The Cromwell rocks violently to one side. Harland's head slams against the radio housing. His vision goes white. When it clears, he hears Wyatt laughing, wild, unhinged, disbelieving laughter. They're alive. The Tiger, confused by the ricochet, hesitates for half a second. It's enough. The Cromwell reverses into an alley, smoke pouring from its engine deck, and disappears into the ruins. 3 hours later, back at the repair depot, a crowd gathers around the hull. The 88mm impact crater is the size of a dinner plate, scorched, deformed, but not breached. The welded track links are shattered, but they held. A captain from the Royal Armored Corps crouches beside the scar, running his fingers over the twisted metal. He looks up at Wyatt. "Who told you to do this?" Wyatt shrugs. "No one, sir. We just didn't want to die." The captain stands. He stares at the wreckage for a long moment. Then he says, "Show me how you did it." Stories like these deserve to be remembered. But to understand why a crew would weld scrap to their own tank in the middle of a war zone, why they'd risk court-martial, ridicule, and their own sanity, you have to go back. Back to where it all started. Back to the man who had the idea first. And back to the moment the British Army realized it was sending its crews to die in metal coffins. North Africa, 1942. The Western Desert is not a place. It's a test. Sand gets into everything: rifle bolts, tank treads, mouths, lungs. Temperatures swing 50 degrees between day and night. Men bake inside their steel hulls during the day and freeze at night. Water is rationed. Fuel is scarce. Hope is scarcer. And the Germans have better tanks. The Afrika Korps fields the Panzer III and IV, machines with sloped armor, reliable engines, and crews who've been fighting since Poland. The British counter with Crusaders, Matildas, and Valentines, tanks designed for a war that no longer exists. Their armor is flat. Their guns are underpowered. Their crews are brave, green, and dying in alarming numbers. By mid-1942, British tank losses in North Africa exceed 60% in some engagements. Not destroyed. Not disabled. Penetrated. Brewed up. Burned alive. The tankers have a nickname for their vehicles: Ronsons. Lights first time, every time. The problem isn't courage. It's geometry. German anti-tank guns, the 50mm Pak 38, the 75mm Pak 40, and the infamous 88mm flak, are designed to punch through vertical armor at range. British tank doctrine, inherited from World War I, prioritizes mobility and firepower over protection. The armor is just thick enough to stop machine gun fire. Against a high-velocity shell, it's tissue paper. Crews know this. They climb into their tanks every morning knowing that one clean hit will kill them all. Some pray. Some joke. Some stop talking altogether. And one man, a tank commander in the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment named Sergeant Stanley Hollis, starts looking for scrap metal. Hollis is 29 years old. He's not an engineer. He's not a theorist. He's a Durham coal miner who joined the army in 1939 because the mine was closing and the war seemed like steady work. He has a wife back home, a daughter he's never met, and a crew of 4 men who trust him to keep them alive. He's also stubborn. After his 3rd tank is knocked out in as many weeks, each time by a Pak-40 at ranges where he can't even see the gun, he starts walking the salvage yards at night. He drags sections of destroyed track back to his tent. He sketches diagrams in the sand with a stick. His crew thinks he's losing it. "Stan," his gunner says one night, "we're not blacksmiths." Hollis doesn't look up. "No. But we're not corpses either." The idea is simple, almost stupid in its simplicity. If the tank's armor is too thin, make it thicker. Not with factory plates. Not with requisition forms. With whatever's lying around. Track links. Spare wheels. Sandbags. Concrete. Anything dense enough to disrupt a shell's penetration before it reaches the hull. It's improvisation born of desperation. But desperation has a way of clarifying thought. The British Army, meanwhile, has a rule. No modifications to vehicles without written approval from the War Office. It's a sensible rule. Tanks are precision instruments. Unauthorized welding can weaken the hull. Extra weight can break the suspension. Field modifications can void warranties, disrupt supply chains, and, worst of all, set dangerous precedents. But the rule was written by men in London who've never felt the air inside a burning tank. Hollis doesn't ask for permission. Late one night in November 1942, he and his crew weld sections of broken track links to the front glacis of their Crusader. The welds are crude. The spacing is uneven. It looks like a child's art project. His crew names it the Scarecrow. Hollis just calls it insurance. 2 days later, they're ordered into action near El Agheila. And Hollis gets his answer. November 17, 1942. El Agheila, Libya. The engagement lasts 4 minutes. Hollis's troop, 3 Crusaders, advances through a dried wadi toward a suspected enemy position. Intelligence says it's abandoned. Intelligence is wrong. The Pak-40 opens fire from a ridge 800 meters out. The first Crusader explodes instantly. The second slews sideways, smoke pouring from its engine deck. The crew bails out, running for cover as machine gun fire stitches the sand around them. Hollis's tank is third in line. He sees the muzzle flash. Hears his driver scream, "Contact!" over the intercom. Feels the shell hit. It strikes the front glacis, right where they welded the track links. The impact is deafening. The tank rocks backward. Hollis is thrown against the turret wall. His ears ring. His vision doubles. But the shell doesn't penetrate. It detonates on the track links, shredding them into fragments. The blast scars the glacis beneath, but the main armor holds. The crew is shaken, not dead. Hollis keys the intercom. His voice is steady. "Driver. Reverse. Now." They back into the wadi and disappear from the gun's line of sight. For 10 seconds, no one speaks. Then his loader, a 19-year-old from Manchester named Tommy Price, starts laughing. It's not joyful. It's the kind of laughter that happens when terror has nowhere else to go. "It bloody worked," Price says. Hollis touches the scorched metal above his head. The weld is still warm. "Yeah," he says quietly. "It did." That night, Hollis doesn't sleep. He sits outside his tent, sketching in the sand again. This time, his crew sits with him. "What if we added more?" Price asks. "Not just the front. Sides. Turret." "Wait," the driver says. "We add too much, the suspension gives out." "Then we use lighter materials," Hollis says. "Spare wheels. Sandbags. anything that disrupts the shell before it hits. Sandbags. The gunner sounds skeptical. Concrete's better, Hollis says. But we don't have concrete. We have sandbags. He draws a rough schematic, a layer of track links welded to the hull, spaced a few inches out. Behind that, sandbags lashed to brackets. Behind that, the original armor. It's not elegant. It's not doctrine. But it's layered. And layers mean a shell has to punch through multiple surfaces, each one slowing it, deforming it, bleeding its energy, before it reaches the crew. It'll look like a scrap heap, the driver says. Hollis nods. Good. Let the Germans laugh. Word spreads. By December, 3 other crews in the regiment have added improvised armor to their tanks. By January 1943, it's a dozen. They use whatever they can find, destroyed tracks, spare road wheels, even sections of corrugated iron from bombed-out buildings. The modifications are crude, asymmetric, ugly. But they work. Crews report deflections, partial penetrations, near misses that would have been kills. The modifications don't make the tanks invincible, nothing can, but they shift the odds. A 50mm shell that would have punched clean through now glances off. A 75mm round that would have brewed up the crew instead detonates harmlessly against a spare wheel. The tankers start calling it appliqué armor. The officers call it insubordination. February 1943. A British colonel inspects the tanks at a forward depot. He walks down the line, face expressionless, stopping at each modified vehicle. Track links. Sandbags. Spare wheels. One crew has bolted a section of railway track to their turret. The colonel turns to Hollis, who stands at attention. Sergeant, the colonel says slowly, do you have any idea what the War Office would say if they saw this? Hollis meets his eyes. No, sir. They'd have you court-martialed. Yes, sir. The colonel stares at him, then at the tanks, then back at Hollis. How many deflections so far? 11 confirmed, sir. Across the regiment. The colonel is silent for a long moment. Then he says, carry on, Sergeant. He walks away without another word. Hollis exhales. He had to test it, under fire. And fire was coming. March 6, 1943. Medellin, Tunisia. The Germans attack at dawn. Rommel, desperate, cornered, running out of time, throws 3 panzer divisions at the British 8th Army in a last-ditch attempt to break the Allied line. It's a massive, coordinated assault. 160 tanks, supported by infantry, artillery, and dive bombers. The British are dug in. Hollis's troop is positioned on the southern flank, hull down behind a low ridge. Their job is simple: hold the line. Don't break. Don't run. Easier said than done. 6:14 hours. The first German tanks appear on the horizon, Panzer IIIs and IVs, moving in formation, their turrets scanning for targets. Behind them, half-tracks and infantry advance in staggered waves. Hollis peers through his periscope. The desert floor is rippling with heat, even this early. The German tanks look like mirages, until they start firing. A shell screams overhead. Another impacts 50 meters to the left, throwing up a column of sand. Range? Hollis asks. 1,200 meters, his gunner says. Wait. The Germans advance. 1,100 meters. 1,900. Now. The gunner fires. The 6-pounder round arcs out, striking a Panzer III in the turret. The shell bounces off harmlessly, too far, wrong angle. The Panzer doesn't even slow down. Bugger, the gunner mutters. 800 meters. The Germans return fire. A 75mm shell hits the ridge in front of Hollis's tank, spraying the hull with rock fragments. Another shell strikes the turret of the Crusader to his right. It brews up instantly, orange flame, black smoke, no survivors. Hollis's driver is breathing hard over the intercom. Stan. Hold, Hollis says. 700 meters. The gunner fires again. This time, the round punches through the Panzer III's side armor. The tank slews sideways, smoke pouring from its hatches. The crew bails out. "Hit!" the gunner shouts. But 2 more panzers are already closing in. 6:22 hours. A 75mm shell strikes Hollis's tank. It hits low, on the front glacis, right where they welded the track links and lashed sandbags behind them. The world stops. Hollis feels the impact in his chest, his teeth, his bones. The sound is so loud it doesn't register as sound. It's a physical force, a pressure wave that crushes thought. The track links explode outward. The sandbags disintegrate. The shell detonates on the improvised armor, sending shrapnel rattling against the hull like hail. But the main armor holds. Inside, the crew is deafened, bruised, bleeding from their noses. Price is slumped against the turret wall, eyes wide and unfocused. The driver is screaming something incomprehensible. Hollis grabs the gunner's shoulder. Shakes him. "Fire!" The gunner blinks. Finds his sight picture. Fires. The round catches the Panzer IV in the flank. It stops moving. 6:30 hours. The German assault breaks. Not because of Hollis. Not because of one tank. But because the entire British line holds, and Rommel doesn't have the fuel or ammunition for a prolonged fight. The panzers withdraw, leaving 52 destroyed tanks scattered across the desert. Hollis's troop survives. 3 tanks knocked out. 2 crews killed. But Hollis's Crusader, the Scarecrow, with its patchwork armor and desperate welds, rolls back to the depot under its own power. If you're still here, you already feel what they faced. The hull is scarred. The improvised armor is shredded. But the crew is alive. And that makes all the difference. That evening, a major from the 8th Army's Armored Command visits the depot. He walks around the Scarecrow in silence, hands behind his back. He examines the impact crater, the blown-out track links, the remnants of sandbags still clinging to the hull. Finally, he turns to Hollis. "How many hits did you take?" "3 direct, sir. 2 glancing." "Casualties?" "None, sir." The major nods slowly. Then he says something Hollis will never forget. "Sergeant, the War Office is going to hate this. But you may have just saved the British Armored Corps." Hollis doesn't know what to say, so he just nods. But not everyone was convinced. April 1943. Cairo, Egypt. The report lands on a desk at Middle East Command like a live grenade. Subject: Unauthorized field modifications to armored vehicles. Author: Major R.J. Whitaker, Royal Armored Corps. Summary: crews are welding scrap metal to tanks. It's working. What do we do? The response is immediate and divided. Some officers see the modifications as proof of British ingenuity under fire. Others see them as a breakdown of discipline, a dangerous precedent that could undermine the entire supply and maintenance chain. A memo circulates. While the courage and resourcefulness of frontline crews is commendable, unauthorized modifications compromise structural integrity, void manufacturer specifications, and create logistical nightmares. All field modifications must cease pending formal review. It's signed by 3 brigadiers. It's also ignored. By May 1943, the practice has spread beyond the 3rd Royal Tank Regiment. Crews in the 7th Armored Division are doing it. The 4th Armored Brigade. Even some American tank crews, hearing rumors from their British counterparts, start bolting spare track to their Shermans. The modifications vary wildly. Some crews weld full sections of track across the entire glacis. Others attach spare road wheels to the turret. One enterprising crew in the 2nd Armored Brigade pours concrete into the space between the hull and a layer of sheet metal, creating a crude composite armor. It's messy. It's inconsistent. It's brilliant. And it's saving lives. But not everyone is grateful. One crew, Corporal James Liddell and his men, is reprimanded for their modifications. Their squadron commander, a by-the-book captain named Reginald Finch, orders them to remove the appliqué armor immediately. "You're overloading the suspension," Finch says. "You're creating weak points in the hull. You're making my squadron look like a salvage yard." Liddell, standing at attention, says nothing. "Do you have anything to say, Corporal?" Liddell looks him in the eye. "With respect, sir, my crew is still alive." Finch's jaw tightens. "Remove it." "That's an order." Liddell salutes. "Yes, sir." That night, he and his crew remove the modifications. 2 days later, their tank is hit by a Pak-40 during a reconnaissance patrol. The shell punches clean through the glacis, killing the driver and gunner instantly. Liddell and the loader survive, but barely. When Finch visits him in the field hospital, Liddell says only one thing. "I told you, sir." Finch doesn't respond. But a week later, he quietly authorizes his squadron to resume field modifications. Word of that decision reaches other units. Momentum builds. By summer 1943, the British Army faces a choice. Court-martial every crew that modifies their tank, or accept that doctrine written in 1940 doesn't fit a war in 1943. The decision is made easier by 2 factors. The numbers. Tank losses among crews using improvised armor are 30 to 40% lower than those without. The Americans. U.S. tank crews, hearing about the British modifications, start doing the same thing, and they have more resources, more welding gear, and more scrap metal to work with. If the practice spreads to the Americans, the British can't exactly condemn it without looking hypocritical. So instead, they do something remarkable. They study it. June 1943. A technical team from the Ministry of Supply visits North Africa. They interview crews, examine modified tanks, take measurements, run tests. Their conclusion is cautious but undeniable. While improvised armor does not meet factory standards, it demonstrably increases survivability in frontline conditions. Recommend formal guidelines for field application pending further study. It's not an endorsement. It's not a celebration. But it's permission. And for men like Hollis, that's enough. And yet, few remember his name. Because what happens next changes everything. September 1943. Percy Hobart enters the story. Major General Percy Hobart is not a man who follows rules for their own sake. He's a tank theorist, an innovator, and, according to some of his peers, a lunatic. He's also a genius. In 1943, Hobart is tasked with developing specialized armored vehicles for the invasion of Europe. His mandate is broad: create tanks that can do things normal tanks can't. Clear minefields. Breach fortifications. Swim ashore. He calls them Hobart's funnies. Others call them mad science. But when Hobart hears about the improvised armor being used in North Africa, he doesn't dismiss it. He demands to see it. October 1943. Hobart visits a training depot in England. He watches as a crew demonstrates their modifications. Track links welded to a Churchill tank, spaced out with brackets. Sandbags behind that. Spare wheels bolted to the turret sides. Hobart circles the tank slowly, tapping the armor with his cane. He peers at the welds. He measures the spacing with his hands. Finally, he turns to the crew. "Why did you do this?" The commander, a sergeant named Mills, hesitates. "Sir, we didn't want to die." Hobart nods. "Good answer." He orders a test. The test is simple. Fire a 75mm anti-tank gun at the modified Churchill from 500 meters. See what happens. The crew is not inside. The gun fires. The shell strikes the improvised armor, track links, sandbags, and all. It detonates on the outer layer, shredding the track links but failing to penetrate the main hull. The sandbags absorb most of the remaining energy. The hull is scarred but intact. Hobart stares at the impact crater for a long time. Then he says, "Do it again. Closer." They fire from 300 meters. Same result. Hobart turns to his staff. "I want this documented. I want specifications drawn up. And I want every tank in the 79th Armored Division equipped with some form of appliqué armor before D-Day." One of his aides protests. "Sir, the War Office can file a complaint," Hobart interrupts. "After we win the war." With one order, everything changed. By early 1944, the British Army issues formal guidelines for field modifications. The document is dry, technical, bureaucratic. But buried in the text is a revolutionary idea. Crews are authorized to apply supplementary armor using locally available materials, provided such modifications do not exceed specified weight limits or compromise vehicle mobility. It's not quite an endorsement of Hollis's original idea, but it's close. More importantly, it's official. Crews no longer have to sneak around at night. They no longer risk court-martial for trying to survive. They can weld, bolt, and lash armor to their tanks openly, with the Army's blessing. By D-Day, thousands of British and Commonwealth tanks carry some form of improvised or supplementary armor. Shermans land on Normandy beaches with spare track welded to their hulls. Churchills roll into Cannes with sandbags lashed to their sides. Cromwells, like the one at Villers-Bocage, carry tin foil armor that deflects 88mm shells. The modifications don't make the tanks invincible, but they make the crews harder to kill. And in a war of attrition, that's the difference between survival and annihilation. Hollis never receives a medal for his innovation. He's never mentioned in dispatches. His name doesn't appear in the official histories. He survives the war, returns to Durham, and goes back to work in the mines. He dies in 1967, at the age of 54, from complications related to coal dust inhalation. His obituary in the local paper is 4 sentences long. It doesn't mention tanks, but the men who served with him remember. And across Europe, in tank museums and military archives, there are photographs of Shermans and Cromwells and Churchills covered in improvised armor, track links, sandbags, spare wheels. Ugly, asymmetric, life-saving. And yet, few remember his name. But maybe that's about to change. The numbers tell part of the story. By the end of World War II, an estimated 60 to 70% of British tanks in frontline service carry some form of improvised or supplementary armor. The practice spreads to American, Canadian, and Polish units. Even some German crews, desperate in the war's final months, begin welding spare track to their own vehicles. The impact on survivability is measurable. Tanks with appliqué armor experience 30 to 40% fewer catastrophic penetrations than unmodified vehicles. Crew survival rates increase by an estimated 15 to 20% in engagements involving direct fire. The psychological effect, crews believing they have a fighting chance, improves morale and combat effectiveness. But the numbers only tell part of the story. The real legacy is cultural. For the first time in modern military history, frontline soldiers dictate doctrine. Not generals. Not engineers. Not bureaucrats in London or Washington. Soldiers. Men who know what it feels like to sit inside a steel coffin while 88mm shells scream toward them. Men who understand that the difference between life and death often comes down to a few inches of scrap metal welded on at midnight by exhausted hands. The British Army, to its credit, listens. And in listening, it sets a precedent. Innovation doesn't always come from the top down. Sometimes it comes from the bottom up, from desperation, from necessity, from men who refuse to die quietly. After the war, the practice influences tank design worldwide. The Soviet T-54, introduced in 1947, features spaced armor as a built-in design element, a direct evolution of the improvised layering used in World War II. American tanks in Korea and Vietnam carry appliqué armor kits, officially sanctioned and mass-produced. Modern main battle tanks, the M1 Abrams, the Challenger II, the Leopard II, incorporate reactive armor, composite layering, and modular protection systems. All descendants, in one way or another, of Hollis's crude welds in the Libyan desert. The idea persists because it works. And it works because someone, somewhere, refused to accept that "this is how we've always done it" was a good enough reason to die. In 1998, a British military historian named David Fletcher publishes a book on World War II tank modifications. He dedicates an entire chapter to appliqué armor. In the footnotes, he writes, "The widespread adoption of improvised armor by British tank crews in 1942–43 represents one of the most remarkable examples of grassroots innovation in military history. The practice saved countless lives and influenced tank design for decades. Yet the names of the men who pioneered it, men like Sergeant Stanley Hollis of the 3rd RTR, are almost entirely forgotten." Fletcher tried to find Hollis's family. He left messages with the Durham Miners Association. He searched census records. He never got a response. Hollis's name appears in no official commendation. No medal citation. no plaque, just a footnote. And yet, few remember his name. But you do now. June 1944. Villers-Bocage. Trooper James Harland climbs out of his Cromwell for the last time. The tank is wrecked, tracks blown, engine dead, hull scarred by the 88mm impact. But the crew is alive. All 5 of them. Harland runs his hand over the crater where the shell hit, where the improvised armor, mocked as tin foil by the mechanics, deflected a round that should have killed them all. He doesn't know who first thought of welding scrap to a tank. He doesn't know the name Stanley Hollis. But he's alive because of him. War is full of big names. Generals who move armies. Politicians who sign treaties. Inventors who design weapons. But war is also full of small names. Forgotten names. Men like Hollis, who never gave a speech or wrote a memoir or sat for a medal ceremony. Men who simply looked at a problem and refused to accept that there was no solution. Men who bent metal with their hands because no one else would. And maybe that's the real story. Not that one man saved thousands. But that one man tried. And trying, in the face of indifference and mockery and bureaucratic inertia, is its own kind of heroism. If this story moved you, help keep these names alive. Not because they were saints. Not because they were perfect. But because they were there, in the sand and the smoke and the terror, doing what needed to be done. Share where you're watching from. Let history be remembered together. And if you ever see an old tank in a museum, scarred, ugly, covered in improvised armor, pause for a moment. Someone survived because of that. Someone went home. That's worth remembering. In the end, it wasn't the armor that mattered. It was the refusal to give up.